I used to believe in second chances. In the quiet moments before the world wakes up, when my son would still be asleep and the coffee hadn't yet brewed, I would look at my wife and think, this is it. This is life. A simple, imperfect, but warm life. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was there. A present husband. A devoted father. That should have been enough. Right? We met in college. Her name was Julia. She was the kind of girl who made silence feel comforting. We weren't a perfect match on paper. She came from a more affluent family, and I was just trying to make it through school without drowning in debt. But somehow, we fit. She smiled at my awkward jokes. I admired her quiet strength. It wasn't the kind of love that burns fast and dies quicker. It was the kind that you build brick by brick. We dated for 3 years before getting married. She supported me while I took night classes. I helped her through the anxiety of changing jobs. And when we had our son, Caleb, it felt like everything had finally clicked into place. Caleb was our glue, our purpose. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. It was always the three of us. He looked so much like Julia, but had my eyes. I loved him more than anything. I still do. But maybe love isn't always enough to stop someone from drifting. The first time I felt it, that something was wrong, it wasn't a scream. It was silence, the kind that hangs between people who used to laugh together. She started, staying out later, blaming work. She used her phone more, but turned the screen away. She didn't kiss me goodbye anymore, not even on autopilot. Still, I tried to brush it off. Marriage has seasons, I told myself. Maybe we were just going through one of those colder months. I planned a weekend trip for us, just the two of us, something small, a chance to reconnect. But she said she couldn't get time off. Then I saw her smiling at her phone one evening, when she thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't just the smile. It was the way she smiled, like she hadn't smiled at me in years. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I waited. One day, Caleb asked an innocent question that broke something in me. "Dad, who's Uncle Ben?" I froze. "Who?" "Uncle Ben. Mommy said we're going to see him tomorrow." Ben. I didn't know any Ben. Neither did her family. Neither did mine. I asked her that night, casually. "Who's Ben?" She didn't flinch. That's what hurt most. No panic, no guilt, just calm detachment. "He's a friend from work," she said. "Why?" "No reason," I replied. I smiled. I even kissed her on the cheek. Because I knew right then, I needed proof. And if I pushed too soon, she'd bury it deeper. I called in sick the next day. I followed her car as she picked up Caleb from school. My hands trembled on the wheel. I wasn't built for this kind of thing. Suspicion. Surveillance. I felt like a criminal watching my own life unfold from a distance. She drove to a park across town, not one we usually go to. I stayed far enough to not be noticed, but close enough to see. And then he arrived. Tall, well-dressed, smiling like he owned the world. Julia stepped out of the car, fixed her hair in the side mirror, and walked straight into his arms. Caleb was right behind her. He ran up, and the man, Ben, I assumed, lifted him like they'd known each other for years. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, in my car, my hands gripping the wheel so tight they turned white. And I watched. My wife brought our son to meet her affair partner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her, listening to her breathing, wondering how many lies she had told while looking me in the eye, wondering how she could include Caleb in something so selfish, so reckless. She had crossed a line, not just with me, but with our son. That wasn't just betrayal. That was theft. She was stealing my time, my trust, my child's innocence. And still, I said nothing. Because when you've been betrayed by the one person you trusted most, you don't scream. You plan, and I had just begun. I think the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was pretending not to know. Waking up each morning, pouring her a cup of coffee, packing Caleb's lunch, and smiling like everything was fine. But something inside me had changed. It was quiet, almost invisible, but it was there. A kind of resolve I'd never felt before. For the first few days, I watched her closely. She came home late again that week, said her boss was keeping her back for overtime. I nodded, pretending to sympathize. I asked how work was. She said, busy, stressful. I just looked at her and said, I know the feeling. But what I didn't say was, I knew she wasn't working late. I knew she was with him. And worst of all, she was taking Caleb along on some of those outings, putting him in the middle of her affair like it was normal. So I started gathering evidence. I'm not a vengeful person. I've never been the type to spy or dig through someone's phone. But when it came to Caleb, I had no choice. I couldn't risk losing him to a reality he didn't choose. I bought a small voice recorder, slipped it under the passenger seat of her car one morning before she left. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know how far this had gone. When she returned that evening, she was unusually sweet, kissed me on the cheek, made pasta for dinner, even asked if I wanted to watch a movie. It was like living with a ghost. Her gestures were familiar, but the woman behind them wasn't the same. That night, I listened to the recording in our garage with the door closed. I heard her singing softly along to the radio. Then Caleb's voice. Are we going to Uncle Ben's? Again? Not today, baby. He's busy. Will he come over to our house sometime? There was a long pause. I don't know. Maybe one day. And Daddy? Will he come too? Another pause. Then her voice, softer now. No, sweetie. Daddy doesn't need to know. I stopped the recording there. I couldn't listen anymore. The next day, I contacted a lawyer, not to destroy her, but to protect my son. I wasn't going to let Caleb be raised in a house built on lies. I wasn't going to let him be passed between two adults who treated the truth like an inconvenience. I didn't file anything yet. I wanted to be sure, wanted to gather more, so I followed her again. This time, she met Ben at a coffee shop. No Caleb, just the two of them. I sat in a corner, hidden behind a newspaper, like I was living in some old movie. I watched them laugh, lean in close, whisper like teenagers. But what struck me most wasn't the affection. It was the ease. The way she looked at him without guilt, the way her body relaxed in his presence, like he was her real home. And I, what was I? A placeholder? A safety net? I snapped a photo, then another. I wasn't shaking this time. I wasn't even angry, just tired. When she got home that night, she acted like everything was fine again. She told me Caleb had done well in school, showed me a drawing he made, our family, hand in hand. Except there were 4 figures. I asked her casually, "Who's this?" She hesitated. "That's just a friend. Caleb added him for fun." I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I let my smile fade. I said nothing, just turned and walked to the bedroom. Something shifted that night. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was the silence, but she started acting different. She became more attentive, packed my lunch for work, sent me random texts throughout the day, asked how I was feeling. She even suggested we take Caleb on a weekend trip together, like old times. It might have worked if I hadn't already seen the truth. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. Because deep down, I realized this wasn't just about cheating. It was about manipulation. She wasn't sorry, she was scared. She sensed something in me had changed. Maybe it was the way I looked at her, or the way I no longer tried to hold her hand in public. Maybe she could tell I wasn't asking questions anymore because I already had answers, and that scared her more than any confrontation would have. One night, as we lay in bed, she whispered, "Are you happy?" I turned to her slowly. "Are you?" She looked like she wanted to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "I want us to be a family again. I made some mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." I nodded. "Thanks for telling me." She waited, probably hoping I'd say something back, that I'd say I forgave her, that we could start over. But I didn't, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any declaration. And in that silence, I saw her face twist, not in sadness, but in uncertainty. She knew then. I wasn't going to be her doormat. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. She had used my trust like it was disposable. Now, I was going to protect the only person who mattered, Caleb. And she had no idea what was coming. Change doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it sneaks in slowly, like light filling a dark room. And before you realize it, you're not the same man anymore. After that night, I stopped pretending, not outwardly. I still greeted her in the morning, still made breakfast for Caleb, still folded the laundry. But inside, a wall had gone up, thick, soundproof, and final. Julia tried harder than ever. She started suggesting couples counseling, asked if I wanted to go on dates again, bought me a watch for no reason, something expensive, something she knew I couldn't afford myself. Guilt has a way of turning into generosity, but none of it reached me. Not really. Because my focus had shifted, I began documenting everything, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I kept a log of every time she left the house and where she said she was going. I noted down when she took Caleb and how long they were gone. I even started recording our conversations, carefully, legally. My lawyer told me which states allowed what. I made sure I was covered. Because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about custody. If she was going to drag Caleb into this mess, I needed to show the court who she truly was behind that practiced smile. I started going to the gym, again, eating better, dressing like someone who gave a damn. People noticed. Co-workers said I seemed lighter. My sister asked if I was dating again. I wasn't. But something inside me had reawakened. I wasn't broken anymore. Julia noticed too. One evening, she came home early from work and found me playing guitar in the living room, a hobby I hadn't touched in years. "You're smiling more these days," she said, standing in the doorway. I didn't look up. "Yeah, I guess I am." She came closer, sat down beside me. "I've missed this side of you." I didn't respond, just kept strumming. After a moment, she added softly, "Do you still love me?" I finally turned to her, met her eyes. "I don't know if I ever stopped," I said, "but I do know I can't love someone who doesn't respect me." The words hung in the air like smoke. She didn't argue. She didn't deny. She just lowered her eyes and stayed silent. That was the first time I saw a crack in her mask, not of confidence, but of fear. She knew I had changed, and change, to someone who relies on control, is terrifying. Around that time, Caleb came home from school with a note. "Please join us for Family Day next Friday." It was a small event, a picnic. Parents spending the afternoon with their kids. Nothing monumental, but I knew it would be important. Julia said she had a meeting and might be late. I knew that meant Ben might show up, so I asked her gently, "Do you want me to go alone with Caleb?" She hesitated. "No, I'll try to be there." I nodded. "Okay." But in truth, I already had a plan. I arrived early, found a quiet spot on a bench, coffee in hand, watching the playground. Caleb ran around with his classmates, beaming. His teacher smiled at me. "He's such a happy kid," she said. "I hope he stays that way," I replied softly. Julia arrived 20 minutes later. Alone, I pretended to be surprised. "Ben couldn't make it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Excuse me?" I smiled. "I just figured he might want to see Caleb again." Her mouth opened, but no words came. I leaned closer, quiet, calm. I know, Julia. She turned away, not because she didn't want to respond, but because she couldn't. That was the moment she realized I wasn't blind anymore, and I saw it, the shift in her posture. Like prey realizing it's been spotted. I didn't push it. I didn't shame her in public. Because I wasn't there to win a scene. I was there to win something far greater. The future of my son. Back, home, things grew colder. She stopped with the surprises, the sweet gestures, the forced conversations. She no longer tried to save the marriage, and I no longer pretended to be interested. One evening, she finally asked, "Are you planning something?" I looked at her, and I saw it. Real fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the unknown. "I'm planning to protect Caleb," I said. "That's all you need to know." She left the room without another word. It was the first time she didn't have a comeback. That weekend, I filed for custody. Not divorce. Not yet. Just custody, because she'd crossed a boundary I couldn't ignore. And the law was now my next conversation. I gave my lawyer everything. Photos, recordings, journal entries. He read through them, silent and steady, then looked up. "You've got a case," he said. "A strong one." I nodded. "I don't want to destroy her. I just want my son safe." "And we'll do just that," he replied. I left the office lighter. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not because I was going to win, but because I finally stood up. For myself and for Caleb. Julia still didn't know the paperwork had been filed, and I didn't tell her. Because some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to arrive, uninvited, unstoppable, and undeniable. Like the storm she never saw coming. I didn't tell Julia I filed the custody papers. Not because I wanted to ambush her, but because I needed clarity. I needed to see who she really was when the mask finally came off. The silence between us grew sharper after that weekend. She began watching me like I was the one with something to hide. The irony of it would have made me laugh if it didn't ache so much. It was a Tuesday morning when she finally broke the silence. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Not angry, but cautious. "I've noticed. You're different. Lately," she said. I sipped my coffee and raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "You're distant, calculated." I didn't deny it. "I've just been thinking, that's all." "About us?" "No. About Caleb." That shut her up. Her expression shifted, like she was trying to figure out what I really meant. But I didn't give her any more than that. Because the truth was, I wasn't just thinking, I was preparing. My lawyer had explained everything in detail. In cases like this, custody often came down to who could provide the most stable, consistent environment. But emotional manipulation, neglect, even involving a child in an affair, those things mattered. I wasn't just fighting for time with my son. I was fighting for his future. So I started making changes. I switched jobs to something closer to home, with better hours. Less pay, sure, but more time with Caleb. I joined a parenting support group, not because I needed advice, but because I needed witnesses, people who could testify to my role as a dedicated father. I also reached out to Caleb's teachers, asked for progress, reports, scheduled regular meetings, became a more visible presence in his education, not as a strategy, but as a necessity. He deserved someone who would be there, fully there. Meanwhile, Julia grew erratic. One evening, she snapped. Over something small, a misplaced bill, I think, but the way she exploded, the venom in her voice, it was different. "You're trying to turn him against me, aren't you?" she hissed. "You think you're some kind of saint?" I looked at her calmly. "No, Julia, I'm just being a father." Her eyes burned. "You think you can take him from me? I think he deserves to live in a home where he's not used." As a cover story. That one landed. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, she tried to act like nothing had happened, made pancakes, sang to Caleb while packing his backpack. But I saw the tremor in her hands, the crack in her smile. She knew something was coming. And I knew she was unraveling. One afternoon, I received an email from my lawyer. "She's been served." I was at work. I stared at the message for a long time. It didn't feel triumphant, just necessary. That night, when I walked through the door, she was waiting in the living room, papers in hand. "You really did it," she whispered. "You're taking me to court?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, for full custody. I want what's best for Caleb. You made that choice for him when you involved him in something he should have never been a part of. I'm his mother, and I'm his father. One who didn't lie to him, one who didn't drag him into an affair." She started crying. Not the kind of tears that fall from guilt, but frustration, fear. "Do you hate me that much?" I shook my head. "No, Julia. If I hated you, I would have ruined you already. But I won't, because Caleb loves you, and I won't take that from him." She looked up, stunned. "Then why this?" "Because love isn't a shield for bad choices. And you crossed a line." We sat in silence after that. She didn't apologize, and I didn't expect her to. Some people never do, not because they aren't sorry, but because admitting guilt feels like surrender. A few days later, I picked Caleb up from school alone. Julia had forgotten. Again. Said she was at an appointment. He didn't seem surprised. Just climbed into the back seat quietly. After a few minutes, he asked, "Dad, are you mad at Mommy?" I paused. "I'm not mad," I said. "But sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions. Are you and Mommy not going to live together anymore?" I gripped the wheel a little tighter. "We're still figuring that out, buddy. But no matter what, you'll always have us both. Just maybe not in the same house." He nodded. Didn't cry. Just looked out the window and whispered, "Okay." That night, I cried in the garage. Alone. Because that's what no one tells you about doing the right thing. It doesn't always feel right. But I knew I had to keep going. Julia started showing up to school more often after that. Volunteering for bake sales, showing interest in the things she'd ignored before. I knew it wasn't real. It was courtroom optics. But I said nothing. Because in court, performance is easy to spot, and sincerity doesn't have to scream. It just has to show up, day after day. The hearing was approaching, and my lawyer had one more question for me before we stepped into that courtroom. "Do you want to bring up the affair directly?" I thought about it. I thought about exposing every lie, every meeting with Ben, every whisper she thought I didn't hear. But then I shook my head. "No," I said. "Let the facts speak for themselves. I'm not here to punish her. I'm here to protect Caleb." He nodded. "That's the strongest position you could take." And deep down, I knew it was true, because dignity is the one weapon they never see coming. The courtroom wasn't anything like I imagined. There were no dramatic speeches, no gasps from the crowd, just clean floors, beige walls, and the slow, echoing footsteps of people carrying years of pain into a room where strangers would decide what mattered most to them. Julia sat across from me, flanked by her lawyer. Her hair perfectly done, dressed in soft colours like she'd just stepped out of a parenting magazine. She looked calm, at least on the surface. But I could see it, the tight grip on her purse, the slight bounce of her leg under the table. She was nervous, and she should have been. Our son's future was on the line. The judge began with the usual questions. Verification of identities, timeline of the marriage, age of our son. Formalities. Then came the affidavits, my journals, the recordings, the photos. All submitted quietly. No drama. Just truth. Julia glanced over at me when they were brought out. For a second, her confidence wavered. She hadn't expected I would gather that much. She thought I was too soft, too loyal, too predictable. She forgot that silence doesn't mean weakness. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, heart pounding, but voice steady. I didn't come here to take a child from his mother, I began. I came here because my son was brought into something he never asked to be part of. Because he was introduced to another man, under the pretense that this man would have a place in his life, without my knowledge. Because the person I trusted to protect him didn't. There was a pause. The judge looked at Julia. "Is that true?" he asked. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She nodded slightly. "Yes, but it wasn't serious. Ben was a friend. I thought it would help Caleb transition." "Transition into what?" the judge asked. "Was there a separation at the time?" Julia hesitated. "No." "Was the affair ongoing while the child was exposed to this individual?" She didn't answer. And that silence. It was deafening. My lawyer didn't need to twist the knife. The truth had done enough damage on its own. Later, a character witness was brought in. Mrs. Nolan, Caleb's teacher. She was gentle, soft-spoken, but her words carried weight. "Caleb is a bright child," she said, "but I have noticed changes in his drawings. Confusion about who's part of his family. He once told me he didn't know if he was supposed to call someone Uncle Ben or Daddy Ben. I found that very concerning." I could see Julia stiffen. Her lawyer scribbled something furiously on a notepad. But nothing they wrote could undo what had just been said. Then came the twist she never saw coming. My lawyer asked to submit an audio clip. The judge approved. It was brief, just 48 seconds, from the recorder in her car. Caleb's voice asking, "Will Daddy be there when we see Uncle Ben?" Her voice replying, "No, sweetie. Daddy doesn't need to know." The courtroom stayed quiet, but something shifted. Not anger, not chaos, just judgment. The kind that seeps through walls and leaves no space to hide. Julia looked at me, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, she looked small. Not the confident woman who walked in wearing pearls and pleasantries, but someone who knew. She had lost control. When we stepped outside for a short recess, she followed me to the hallway. Her voice was trembling. "Why are you doing this?" I turned to her slowly. Calm, firm. "You did this, Julia. I'm just finishing it." She reached for my arm. "We can work something out. We don't need a judge to decide for us." I stepped back. "You already decided, the moment you brought Caleb into your lie." She swallowed hard. Her eyes brimmed. But the tears didn't fall. Maybe they couldn't. Or maybe she finally realized that crocodile tears don't erase the damage. Back inside, she requested to speak directly to the judge. Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she insisted. She stood and gave a speech about love, about motherhood, about how hard things had been. She said she wasn't perfect, but she loved her son, that she made a mistake, but it came from a place of loneliness. It was a decent performance, but even the judge could see the cracks. He responded calmly. "Loving your child doesn't exempt you from consequences. The court is not here to punish you. It's here to protect the minor involved, and frankly, I'm disturbed by your choices." That was the first real blow. She sat down, almost stunned, because this wasn't just me holding her accountable. This was someone with authority telling her, "You were wrong," and sometimes that hurts more than any argument. Outside the courthouse, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. Not because I had won anything yet, but because for the first time, she understood what I'd known for months. The version of me she took for granted, the passive, forgiving, blind version, was gone. And in his place stood a father who was done asking for respect. He was taking it. The final hearing arrived faster than expected. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting my collar, staring at a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. There was no doubt in his eyes, no hesitation in his breath, just clarity. That day, wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I walked into the courtroom with my head high and my heart steady. Caleb stayed home with my sister. I didn't want him anywhere near this. He deserved peace, not tension thick enough to choke on. Julia arrived moments later. Her face was pale, eyes tired, like she hadn't slept. Maybe she hadn't. I knew that look well. I wore it for months before this began. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then it began. My lawyer spoke first, summarizing everything we'd presented over the last few weeks. The recordings, the photographs, the witness statements, the evidence that Caleb had been placed in a confusing emotional situation. But we saved something for last. It wasn't evidence exactly. It was perspective. My lawyer stepped forward and said, "Your Honor, before we conclude, my client has a final document he would like to share. One that shows the lasting emotional effect this has had, not just on himself, but on the child." The judge nodded. I stood up, pulled out a folded drawing from my case file, and handed it over. It was one of Caleb's recent drawings, 4 stick figures. Again. But this time, he'd labelled them Dad, me, Mom, Ben. Except Ben was drawn, with a giant red X over him, and beneath the picture, in Caleb's own uneven handwriting, "I don't want to go there anymore. I just want to be home." Julia gasped. I didn't look at her. The judge adjusted his glasses, staring at the page longer than expected. Then he placed it down gently and asked, "And how old is Caleb again?" 7, I said. "And he drew this unprompted?" "Yes, I found it in his backpack after school." That was the moment the shift happened. Not just legally, but emotionally. Julia's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "I've heard enough." He turned to Julia. "Miss Clark, you've expressed remorse for your actions, but this child is not just collateral damage. You used your son as a shield for your infidelity. You involved him in adult matters and lied directly to his father about it." She tried to interrupt, but he continued. "I'm not questioning your love for your son, but love without judgment is not parenting. It's selfishness dressed as affection." Then he looked at me. "Mr. Reeves, your restraint throughout this process is commendable. While others might have sought vengeance, you sought protection. That speaks volumes." And with that, he gave his verdict, primary custody granted to me. Julia would receive supervised visitation twice a week until a court-appointed child psychologist deemed her capable of separating personal choices from parenting responsibilities. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply nodded, because in that moment I wasn't thinking about winning. I was thinking about Caleb sleeping in his bed tonight, knowing he was safe, knowing he wouldn't have to call someone else Dad ever again, knowing that I had fought for him, not with fists or insults, but with patience, truth, and quiet conviction. Julia sat frozen. Tears finally fell. Not soft, graceful ones, but broken, uncontrolled sobs. I didn't turn away. I didn't mock her. I just watched as she finally understood. She hadn't just lost custody. She had lost the illusion of control. After the hearing, she caught up with me in the hallway. Her voice was raw, desperate. "You made me look like a monster." I looked her in the eyes, calm, measured. "No, Julia, you did that all on your own." She tried to say something else, but no words came. Her mouth opened, then closed. And for once, she had nothing left to defend herself with. That was the final blow. Not the verdict, but the truth, delivered gently, but undeniably. When I picked Caleb up that evening, he ran into my arms like nothing had changed, like the world was exactly as it should be. We went out for ice cream, sat on a park bench watching the sun dip low behind the trees. He looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" I smiled, pulled him close and whispered, "We already are, buddy." And in that moment, I knew I hadn't just fought a legal battle. I had reclaimed my peace. Life after the courtroom was quieter, not empty, just still. Like a lake after a storm, ripples slowly settling, the air beginning to soften again. There was no celebration, no parade of victory, just Caleb and me, figuring it out day by day. Mornings filled with cereal crumbs and forgotten shoes, evenings with cartoons and bedtime stories. The kind of chaos that, for once, felt welcome. Julia abided by the court order. She showed up for her scheduled visits, on time, dressed properly, playing the role she'd neglected for too long. Supervised, measured, formal. Caleb was polite around her, but something had changed in his eyes. A wall had gone up. Just like the one that had gone up in me months ago. I didn't encourage the distance. I didn't feed him bitterness. I simply told him what I wished someone had told me when I was young. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to love people who've hurt you. Just don't let them keep hurting you. One evening, after Julia left from her visit, Caleb turned to me and asked something that made my heart ache. "Daddy, did Mommy stop loving us?" I kneeled beside him, looked him in the eyes. "No, buddy. Mommy loves you. She just got lost for a while." He thought about it, then nodded slowly. Okay, and somehow, that seemed enough for him. Kids are resilient in ways adults rarely are. They forgive without needing full explanations. They adapt. They trust that love will find them again. And so, I did everything I could to rebuild that love. In him, not just from me, but for the world around him. We planted a garden, just the two of us. Tomatoes, sunflowers, and a little patch of strawberries. Every Saturday, we'd water the soil, pull out weeds, and watch things grow. It became a metaphor neither of us said aloud, but both of us felt deeply. One afternoon, while Caleb was at school, Julia called. I hadn't heard her voice over the phone in weeks. It was softer, less defensive. "Can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" "Not court stuff, not custody, just us, the damage." I hesitated, then agreed to meet at a nearby coffee shop, the same one where I'd once seen her with Ben. This time she arrived alone. No makeup, no pearls, just herself. Stripped down in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I deserved everything the judge said," she began, eyes low. "But I want you to know, I never stopped loving Caleb. I was just too selfish to see what I was doing." I nodded. "I believe you. And I'm sorry for dragging him into my mess, for dragging you into it." I stirred my coffee quietly. That part, I don't think I'll ever forget. I know. There was silence between us for a while. The kind that wasn't awkward, just full of things that didn't need to be said anymore. Then she added, almost in a whisper, "I lost you long before I ever met him." But I didn't have the courage to admit it. I looked at her. She wasn't. The same woman who once thought she could manipulate her way out of consequences. She was smaller now, not in stature, but in ego. "I'm not your enemy, Julia," I said gently. "But I can't protect you from your own choices anymore." She nodded. "I don't expect you to." We left it there. No grand resolution, no rekindled flame. Just a quiet understanding that we were two people who had once shared a life, and now shared a responsibility. Months passed. Caleb flourished. His drawings returned to just 3 stick figures. He made new friends, started playing soccer, asked questions about space and dinosaurs and why clouds float. He laughed more. And me? I healed. Slowly, steadily, in ways no one could see, but I could feel. I started journaling again, picked up old books, even went on a few quiet dates, not out of loneliness, but curiosity, hope. One evening, while watching the stars from our backyard, Caleb crawled into my lap and asked, "Do you think everything will be okay now?" I smiled and said, "I think we're already okay." And in that moment, I believed it. Because this wasn't just the end of something broken. It was the beginning of something stronger, something earned, something built not on illusion, but on truth. And truth, no matter how painful, always finds a way to set you free.